Is there anybody out there?
The lights in the night sky. Skywatchers. We're watching. We're watching.
Did you see that?
Skywatcher
on Skywatcher Radio. Skywatcherradio.com.
Hello, everyone. This is Deborah Jane East, and it is a wonderful day here in Washington, and I have one of my favorite guests here. So let me tell you a little bit about him. James Bartley is an abductee who has been exposed to high levels of spiritual warfare. He has studied in England and Germany. He is a student of military history with an emphasis on intelligence and counterintelligence and special operations. James has worked in the semiconductor industry, the telecommunications industry, if I can get that spit out here, and in county government as an ombudsman. And James also worked for the civil service at a military command in an intelligence-related capacity. And the other thing that I'm very excited to talk about, and I'm sure he'll give us an update, is he's working on a documentary called Don't Mention the Reptillians. And there's a lot of really good people in there, like David Icke, Michael Sarian, Bill Ryan, Peter Maxwell, Slatterly, Mary Rodwell, Janet Kira Lesson, and Simon Parker, and lots more. But it's a really fascinating documentary. I saw some clips from it, and I think a lot of people will learn some things that they never realized about reptilians, so I'll be excited to hear that progress. But James was on my show a while back, and he is still at the #1 position for the most highest-rated show that I've had. So that tells me a lot of people are really interested in finding out about reptilians and things that will just blow their mind. And I'm very happy to have him as a guest. And I want to say hello, James. How are you doing this evening?
Hi, Deborah. I'm doing fine. I'm really pleased to be here and looking forward to our discussion tonight.
Well, we have a lot to talk about. I know you've been very busy. Why don't you just go ahead and update us a little bit about the documentary that you're working on?
Yes, my input was minimal. I just sat down for, about 4 hours to get X amount of footage time in the can with a professional videographer. And Chris Turner is the person who really put this together. He's the brains behind the whole outfit. He's the one who came up with the idea that, the time is right for a very serious documentary about this very serious subject of reptilians. So he went around canvassing all these different people who had some expertise in the field, and eventually he got around to me. So I sat down for an interview one afternoon with a videographer. I answered a list of prepared questions, and a couple of them have been shown little brief clips on YouTube to kind of give the audience, the future audience, a sneak preview of what the documentary is going to be about. But it's not just about me. There's a number of other people on there, like you mentioned. And what I really like about the whole effort is that a lot of the other people included on this documentary have had the reptilian experiences themselves. This isn't just another example of armchair experts, with the bogus scientific model background commenting upon UFOs. No, the people, a lot of these people, and granted, we have differing philosophies sometimes and opinions about this, that, or the other aspect, nuance of the subject of reptilians and UFOs in general. But I think we will see a really good mix, a number of different perspectives from people, many of whom actually had the experiences. That's an important thing, is the viewers will be able to hear first-person testimony from people who've had encounters with the reptilians, as well as insight from people who are well-known in the field, David Icke and Bill Ryan, others that you mentioned. And so I'm really looking forward to this coming out. It's supposedly going to come out sometime in January. We'll see how it goes.
Well, that's great, because I found out recently that a lot of people don't really know about reptilians, and I actually got booted off a couple of groups that I was on because they thought that was crazy. So it is definitely out of the box. It is something that really boggles the mind. Could you just explain, just for a couple of minutes, what is a reptilian for anybody that's listening to the show that's never heard of a reptilian?
A reptilian is kind of a generic term to describe a number of beings and civilizations which are at their root essence saurian, dinosaur-like, lizard-like, serpent-like, even dragon-like in some cases, because there really are dragons. That's a whole other story. But and dracos, which are the winged gargoyle species. So the term reptilian really describes a number of different types and variations of reptilians, because the DNA is a currency of the universe, and because so many different civilizations are involved in genetic engineering, genetic splicing, the creation of hybrid races, so on and so forth, there are not only a number of different reptilian races, but there are hybrid variations in between. In general, they can be described as three basic types, and they're not mutually exclusive. These three different types can all describe one or more types of reptilians. There's the subterranean reptilians, who have lived for ages beneath the surface of the planet. And there are extraterrestrial reptilians who literally come here from other worlds in our universe. And there are beings, reptilians, that are interdimensional in nature, but extraterrestrial and interdimensional are not mutually exclusive. There are many beings that are both extraterrestrial and interdimensional. It all comes down to frequency and resonance, as you know, as Tesla would have said. So, and some of those beings combine all three attributes. They live underground, they're from another planet, and they have interstellar and or interdimensional means of getting to here. Because a lot of these reptilians, they don't need spaceships or craft to get around in. They simply open a portal in one's home, bedroom, living room, and enter through the portal. Or they can simply manifest. They can densify their physical body and densify into 3D physicality in our dimension. And they can also be invisible in our visible spectrum. Of course, the visible spectrum is such a narrow bandwidth, but they can be present, and we may be able to feel their energy, but we cannot see them visually. However, there are many of those gifted with so-called second sight, whether they realize it or not, hybrids of one stripe or another in their own right, and they can easily see reptilians or any other beings that are just out of beyond the visual spectrum, be they mantis beings, Nordics, Palladians, whatever the case may be. And what these beings have done is, through a long-term genetic hybridization program, installing patriarchal religions, installing indoctrination systems where we got shunted into the left hemisphere of our brains, were force-fed alphabet language. We got gradually detuned from our emotional bodies, because we're taught emotions and feelings are bad, especially since most of us come from shame-based, wounded inner child backgrounds. We've been told, and we've learned for ourselves, that unless told otherwise, that feelings and emotions are a bad thing, so let's ignore them, even though that's one of our power centers, our emotional body, allied with a solar plexus will center and coming from a heart-centered place. And what these beings have done is shunted us, for the most part, into the left hemisphere, detuned a lot of us from our true divine self and connection to divine source, and have created this matrix of a society that we see around us today. And that's what I'm here to talk about, is being able to peel back the layers of illusion and then reclaim our inherent power and our inherent abilities and be individuals worthy of wielding such powers and abilities, because that's a big part of it too, and I'll explain more of that as we go along. But in a nutshell, that's what reptilians are, and there really is something to this hybridization process, which David Icke talks about, because after the most recent series of celestially driven cataclysms, there were less people on the surface to have to deal with, and they manipulated a lot of those surviving surface bloodlines, genetic bloodlines, and infused a lot of reptilian DNA into them, gradually moving those bloodlines into positions of power, influence, and authority in front of and behind the scenes. So that's where we're at today, but I do really feel that this paradigm is ending and that there is a major frequency shift underway, and we just have to ride this frequency wave, and because it is a frequency war, and we'll talk more about that.
Well, that is a bit of good news for me, James, because everything I've read about the reptilians says they're all about control, and that's sort of, we're going to be talking about the milabs and everything, so that all goes along with what the reptilians do. And if there is a consciousness change, that would be great, because people that are affected by the reptilians, I tell you, their lives are devastated. There are so many things these people don't have because, they've been abducted, they're a hybrid. They lose their life, basically, because they're under control a lot by the reptilians. So let's go ahead and get into that. Let's talk about the milabs, which are people that have been abducted by the military. And when did you first come in contact with a milab?
In the early 90s, and I'm sure before that, I really became active in this field in early 91, 92. I was doing research on my own, but it wasn't until I relocated to San Diego, California, and became an active member of the San Diego UFO Society, which was a great UFO research organization. It was a grassroots organization made up by and large of people who'd had the experiences. We didn't get bogged down in all the bogus science models and astronomy and a lot of the drivel that a lot of people get hung up in these, in many cases, pointless UFO groups people spend their times at. We really investigated the encounter experiences, the face-to-face encounters that people had with different types of non-human entities, and we also developed sources and heavily researched the deep black military aerospace involvement in the ET UFO phenomena. So we knew the two were hand in glove. The encounter experiences on the one hand, and the fact that the military was deeply involved and the aerospace corporations were deeply involved. Then we began to hear stories and eventually meet individuals who had both alien abduction experiences and oftentimes reptilian experiences too. And they began describing this military, this covert military involvement, wherein they would be essentially kidnapped by deep black elements of the military, and all branches are represented, Army, Navy, Air Force, and the Marines, of course, are part of the Naval Service. And what these milabs would describe, and my definition of a milab is a legitimate alien abductee who also has abduction experiences, encounter experiences with deep black elements of the military, aerospace, medical community, who are often allied with one or more different ET or subterranean races. And so these milabs would be abducted by the military. Oftentimes they were harshly interrogated. They were thoroughly debriefed, utilizing mind control techniques, memory retrieval techniques, so on and so forth, to find out the extent of the individual's involvement with one or more different ET races, because there is an ongoing cosmic war that has been going on millions of years, 4 millions of years. It's completely at variance with what all the New Agers say, that everything is love and light. Throughout the cosmos, indeed, throughout the multiverse, there is conflict and there is abuse meted out at many different levels. And this is reflected also within milabs, because milabs and abductees in many cases wind up being proxies, if you will. Oftentimes they are proxies between one ET group and another ET group that may be in conflict with the first ET group, because most abductees have encounters with different ET races, not just one race, like the David Jacobs of the world would have us believe that it's all just grays and hybrid variants between grays and humans, and that's it. But that's far from the case. There's a bewildering variety of different types of ETs. There's a bewildering variety of just different types of reptilians. And so these milabs not only have encounters with a number of different ETs, but the ET groups that particular military faction, aerospace faction, may be involved with, may be in conflict with some of the ET groups that are interacting with a particular milab. And so they find themselves, oftentimes, these milabs and abductees, caught up in a cosmic tug of war, if you will. Within our DNA is the morphogenetic blueprint resonance of all of our incarnations, including our off-world incarnations, because many of your listeners themselves had lives in the Sirius system, the Pleiades, Lyra, Orion, Draco, this, that, or the other constellation in our dimension. And in truth, many of the higher dimensional, spiritually evolved beings tend to be in a higher dimension from our frame of reference. So it's very seldom that it's just the grays that a milab is interacting with. Often it's not, they're interacting with a variety of different ET races, and contained within the DNA morphic blueprint resonance of these individuals, because DNA is liquid crystalline in nature. They are transceivers, senders and receivers of information, and they're plugged directly into this unified field, right, that encompasses all times, all places in the eternal now. And not only the ETs of all stripes, of all polarities, but the deep black military aerospace know that contained within this DNA morphic blueprint resonance is incredible metaphysical powers and capabilities, and an ancient stellar wisdom, and the ability of the individual in question to interface with the ET technology, oftentimes from more than one civilization, because in truth, we have an extended star family. We didn't just originate from, say, the Pleiades. We've had incarnations at higher dimensions and higher planes from a number of different star systems and galaxies. So we are the sum of all of our parts. And what these military controllers do in league with some of the negative ETs that they're involved with is they utilize milabs as operational assets. They utilize them in a mind-controlled state, oftentimes, or they have the ability to shunt them into alter personalities. And some of these alter personalities not only have entirely different skill sets and an expanded base of knowledge compared to the regular front alter self, but they have all kinds of metaphysical capabilities. So the key for milabs of all stripes, all milabs, is to regain, reacquire, reclaim all these powers you already have, which the controllers are using for their benefit, which is not for the benefit of us and for this planet and for the greater cosmos, but it's for their agenda. And we have to learn how to access and utilize these powers in our own right to fix this wretched paradigm once and for all. You were going to say something?
Well, yeah, you mentioned the metaphysical abilities. I have spoke to some milabs, and I really am impressed by their intelligence and their ability to understand things outside of the box. What are some other abilities that milabs have that they all have in common, with being abducted or a hybrid? What are some of the other physical abilities?
I can only speak about the milabs I've been in commo with, as well as the hearing stories and anecdotal evidence of milabs other friends and colleagues have been in contact with. And my friends and colleagues I trust implicitly when they tell me something. Of course, I have to filter it through my own kind of understanding and intuitive sense. But for the most part, what we've been able to gather is that these milabs brought a lot of these abilities with them. These abilities just didn't manifest in this life. And some of the key milabs that I work with, they've had past lives as high priestesses in ancient Egypt, or high priest, or druidic priestesses, or shamans, or Inuit shamans, or Incan priests, or Atlanteans, Lemurians, and of course, interspersed with those types of lives are lives on Earth in one or more timelines that are more, I guess, mundane in nature, like they were a farmer, or they were a blacksmith, or they were a foot soldier. But often as not, in these past lives, they've had the means and the wherewithal to manifest a lot of these abilities. A lot of them were Native American elders or Aboriginal elders, so on and so forth. In some of their lives, they were military strategists, military commanders, not just foot soldiers, not just grunts, but actual strategists, actual commanders. And going further back, long before their earthly lives, some of them were commanders of galactic alliances and galactic fleets and galactic military operations that spanned a number of timelines and dimensions and planes of reality. When some of your people have out there listening, and I hope whoever listens in the future, we need to embrace all aspects of ourselves. So if some of you listening out there have memories of being like a high priestess in a temple, or bathing in sacred waters, or being a herbalist, whatever the case may be, believe it, that is you, because the dark side is not going to, the archontic forces are not going to provide you with a glimpse of what is not just a past life, but in a different time vector frequency is going on now, in the eternal now. And we have the means, once we reassemble enough DNA strands, as we begin to pull in higher and higher dimensional frequencies, we will begin to merge with more and more of our counterpart selves in these different time vectors and different timelines and alternate planes, etc., etc. We are the sum of all our parts. So we have all this within us anyway, and it's a job of the task at hand is to reclaim our power. So it seems that when these milabs are born into this current incarnation, some of them manage to elude a lot of the obstacles and pitfalls that have been set up in this prison planet spiritual grid. They come back with more past life memory, more metaphysical abilities that they've brought with them from previous incarnations. Now, what's interesting is deep black elements of the military, not just ETs of different polarities, but the military themselves, they seem to be aware of some of our past lives. I know milabs who've been interrogated about their past lives, not about what was going on in their current lives, but what they knew about their past lives. So, I'm answering your question, what is a milab? I look at it in its totality, in its whole holistic sense, that milabs, many of them that are coming to a reality, an awareness of who they are and what they're doing here, they know they're here on a mission, and it was a tough job to take, and part and parcel of that job was to voluntarily submit and allow themselves to be a part of what's the deepest, blackest, most secretive, high-security operation in the cosmos, these milabs secret space programs. It takes a strong soul to want to volunteer into something like that and accept a lot of the abuse that goes along with it. And while I'm on the subject, it must be noted that this abuse has followed milabs and abductees lifetime after lifetime, because I've spoken to a number of female milabs that they were burned at the stake because they were accused of being witches, or maybe they were herbalists, or maybe they were practitioners of this or that, or maybe they were just a woman, right, who had, was gifted and very intelligent. Now, a lot of those women throughout the ages have been persecuted in this reptilian, archontic, patriarchal control system, because diminishing and marginalizing the feminine principle is a major keystone of this archontic reptilian control system. Our power comes from the divine feminine, our telepathy, our astral abilities, our remote viewing capabilities. Those have nothing to do with the left brain hemisphere, Mr. Spock side of ourselves. And so we're made into shame-based beings who mistrust their own feelings. We're told not to have feelings and emotions, and we're told not to have strong imaginations. And a strong imagination is one click removed from full-on manifestation. So these beings, reptilians, military, mantis beings, etc., they access all these milabs and they utilize them for a number of programs which advance the agendas of these different milab control groups. It's not just one milab control group. There seems to be factions, and each faction is an empire building, right? So,
right.
And just to wrap up this part, just remember, everyone out there that has had abduction milab experiences, you were the sum of all your parts. So that is a back door into finding out and reconnecting with all these different parts of yourselves that are scattered in these different time vectors and different timelines. Plug into that. The archontic forces are not going to try to trick you by making you think that you were like a high priest or a Lyran commander in a past life, because that strengthens you at their expense. Now, they may try to activate your ego, because the first thing that archontic forces always try to do is activate the ego of an individual, and once that happens, going dark side or being neutralized or whatever the case may be, is a foregone conclusion. We have to be worthy of having these powers and abilities. We have to be people that the last thing we need are more supervillains with powers in this universe. We need heart-centered people that want to turn the tables and all this. I don't know if I answered your question. Did you want to...
Well, I think you did. And, I reread your interview with Angelia Cardwell, which was an excellent, informative interview. And I was really just astounded at, you're talking about all the things that they've had to endure. And she mentioned, there's egg harvesting, mind control implants, astral attacks, all kinds of things that they have to endure. And I'm thinking, well, there must be a reason for that. And, so that's why, the attributes of milabs or abductees are important, because, you mentioned the military, the ET groups. There is something they want. There is something that they want from these individuals, and sometimes it's connected to abilities and things, in the past life that, attracts them. But the one thing I found interesting, I want to just ask you about this briefly, that Angela said that this is the kicker that throws everybody for a loop. They either get mad and they walk away and they say, I don't believe any of that, or they say, we need to do something about this. Angela said, we are connected to beings who do not care for other human beings at all. We are a food source for them. That in itself is a shocking statement. Have you found that other milabs have mentioned to you about this? And we're talking about the reptilians and some of the ETs who have to have human blood, nutrients and things like that. So what kind of information do you have about that statement?
Barbara Bartholomew, my mentor, and I talked about this many times. We are not at the top of the food chain. And in actual fact, the situation's a lot worse than I could ever let on or what I would publicly let on. There's some things that are just best left unsaid and just, kept within a small circle, let's say, because some of this just is so frightening in its implications that if people really took time to look into it and delve into it, a sense of hopelessness and despair may settle in, right? And one has to be able to detune and detach from the knowledge and the implications and the awareness of this kind of stuff. So what I'm going to talk about is just one small part of a much bigger problem. The fact that we are not at the top of the food chain. There are underground cavern systems all over the world where reptilians of one stripe or another have their bases set up, and some of them are carnivorous, and they do prey upon humans and or humanoid beings. So, and since we happen to be kind of the main kind of surface population, we kind of fall under that cattle type category as far as these beings are concerned. What some of these abductees and milabs have described is thousands, no telling just how many people that are kept in these underground installations, cavern systems, by reptilians and or other beings, and they're kept there basically as a food source. Now, granted, they would like. There's certain humans they would prefer to prey upon more than others, like the younger and the less polluted, for example. But then again, kids all get hammered by vaccines these days. So, but they do have preferences, and and what you also see is because of the hybridization going on, that a lot of these cannibals, a lot of these serial murderers, a garden variety serial murderer, necrophiliac, cannibal, black magician, so on and so forth, is just a garden variety version of these hybrids in these elite kind of secret fraternal orders, so on and so forth. They're just garden variety versions of that, right? And there's no shortage of these serial murderers and serial perps and whatnot. They are a physical manifestation of this in human hybrid form, right? So, because what happens is with the hybridization and the genetic and indeed even magical manipulation of the bloodlines of DNA, they eventually make hordes of hybrids that are genetically, indeed spiritually predisposed to being taken up as a host for these reptilian and or other beings, negative reptilians. And I must say that there are positive reptilians. There are reptilians that have actually tried to help people and have been punished for it by other reptilians. The reason I talk about the bad reptilians from our perspective is because they're the ones causing the problems. So, and what has also been described in account after account is reptilians have shown abductees through holographic screens. Oftentimes, reptilians will show up right in someone's bedroom and or living room and create a holographic projection screen, which becomes 3D because they have a way of pulling the abductee or milab into this holographic screen, and then the person finds themselves in whatever scenario is being presented, and it seems to be in real time, boots on the ground kind of thing, right? And when one is undergoing such an experience, they don't have the time to say, well, is this real? Is it Memorex? Am I not going to get hurt? I mean, you just don't know. You have to play it. You have to wing it, right? And what they've shown in a lot of these holographic futuristic visions are very large craft landing, which Barbie used to call the cattle cars, and thousands of zombied out, people, not just abductees or milabs or any particular demographic group, people in general, in a zombied-out, mind-controlled state, being herded onto the large craft and hauled away before all these cataclysms consume the surface, and there goes their food source, right? Also,
Right.
This is why abductions have increased all across the board, because there are a number of ET races that have reached the end of their evolutionary tether, and they've even mucked around with time to give themselves more time, no pun intended, so they can successfully carry out this hybridization program of theirs, so they can survive, because they're the little gray Zeta bodies or whatever they have, they just ain't cutting it anymore, right? They can transfer their consciousness. A lot of those civilizations seem to have a high consciousness, and they're extremely intelligent, but they lack empathy, basically, right? And they have no qualms about because DNA, again, is a currency of the universe. If the surface population has to undergo a massive culling, well, because of these inbound celestially driven cataclysms, which are on the cusp of coming back again. And see, the powers that be and the different ET, subterranean, interdimensional races of all stripes, they know that we're right on the cusp, and we're actually in the beginning stages of all these celestially driven cataclysms coming back. So that's why the powers that be, they're pushing up us against this timetable. And that's why abductions are increasing. That's why all manner of activities are increasing. Even there's evacuations going on where ET civilizations that had bases underground on this planet, they've relocated to safer seismic zones. In some cases, some ET races have actually left the solar system, right? That's the information I'm getting from my labs, who've been given the option of, by these friendly ET races, do you want to come with, right? And then, to their credit, some of my lab friends say, no, I got a job to do here. Thanks for the offer anyway. Now, whether these beings are leaving on a permanent basis, or is it they're just leaving until things kind of blow over, who knows? Because a lot of these beings, they operate at times, no pun intended again, in outer time, whereas we're stuck on the linear, increasingly accelerating illusion of a time frequency, right? And see, the veils between worlds and the timelines are merging all over the place too, and I can talk more about that. But that's one reason why there's more people disappearing from parks, and forests, and people just disappearing all over the place, right? I mean, people and children especially were disappearing in the hundreds of thousands all the time anyway, every single year. It just hasn't been commented upon, right?
Yeah, and in some countries I heard that it's as much as 10,000 people, within a few months. And some of these people, of course, are, they find them dead, from being killed by other human beings. But there is a large percentage they find no trace at all. And you're right, nobody's commenting on it.
No, they used to. But hundreds of thousands of children and 100,000 people in general, millions, just disappear all the time. Granted, a lot of them will disappear in the humans' slavery, sex slavery networks, but the human sex slavery networks themselves are a manifestation of this reptilian archontic control system. This concept of the reptilian ownership of human beings, where they to them we're cattle. They prey upon us. They even to the point of taking people up as hosts, like perfect possession, as Father Malachi Martin used to take it, where it's the concept of human ownership in extremis, where they literally take people up as hosts, and they make it all these drugs, pharmaceuticals, and illicit drugs that make it even easier for people to be taken up as hosts by one or more entities, right? Because it's a frequency war. So, and I should emphasize that although what I just described, the cattle cars, the underground factory farms and what have you, that sounds very grim. In the overall scheme of things, that's not even as bad as it gets, because we have to get out of this earth-centric, if that's a word, way of thinking and feeling about things, because the entire plane of existence and various aspects of the multiverse are threatened with being totally consumed by a dark, anti-life, anti-universe kind of dark force, which even negative beings are afraid of, right? That's the bigger
that's
picture.
interesting.
That's the bigger picture that people have to keep in mind. I mean, the line has to be drawn somewhere. We're here. We're on this planet. We might as well draw the line here because we're multidimensional quantum beings anyway. I'm talking to the milabs and abductees in particular. And to get back to a point you made about what Angelia said and what you said is that the reason they heap so much abuse on a lot of these milabs from early age is that they want to so break them down that they do not become fully sovereign, reintegrated, fully healed, multidimensional quantum beings in their own right. They want them destabilized, disrupted, eking out a subsistence living, suffering from want, from illness, this, that, and the other. And then when they access them, they turn them into superhuman X-Men type beings, X-women type beings, and then they send them back, down into their impoverished state again, right? So that's what's going on too. And so it must be understood that when I use the term milabs, there's an all-inclusive aspect to that term, because there's more than just Earth human milabs. There are milabs of different types of aliens throughout the cosmos. Aliens that have been conquered and turned into vassals by the reptilian Draco Empire, and been made turned into foot soldiers for the Draco Empire. So a lot of those beings don't really want to do what they're compelled to do, but they don't have a choice. And this is why it's important for healers out there, especially those that can see into other dimensions and that can see into the invisible realms, that you will start having reptilians even come to you for healings, because a lot of these reptilians are implanted with these interdimensional snake entities which take them over, very much like what you see in the Stargate SG-1 TV show, except that it's a physical possession of the Goa'uld snake entities that take up humans as hosts. But the snake entities I'm referring to are these interdimensional etheric snake entities that can grow to tremendous size when they suck up enough energy parasitically from one or thousands of beings, right? And again, they want to keep us in a low vibratory negative ebb, and they constantly hammer us with discordant vibrations and frequencies and rage-inducing frequencies and bad media news, et cetera, et cetera. It's to keep us in a low vibratory ebb. So people need to keep that in mind. But when you hear about stories of the cattle cars and the underground, food processing places, that's not even the worst. That's just what's going on in many planets throughout the cosmos.
As if that wasn't enough.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really bad in itself, but yeah, there's probably worse things going on.
Yes, because the worst thing, we can already see that a lot of these really, really negative beings, these parasitic entities, entire civilizations of them, just how cut off from divine source they are, right? And so I would say that probably the worst thing that can happen to a soul essence, if you will, is to wind up being cut off from source through one means or another. And we must remember that this very planet is a divine physical and metaphysical organism, a sovereign entity in its own right that has its own ascension cycles that adheres to ascension and descension cycles, if you will. So the planet will either ride this frequency wave, or if the archontic beings and forces have their way, it'll forever reside, at least an aspect of this planet, will forever reside in a very dark realm, a realm of abuse, of predation, of manipulation, of being cut off from source. So the stakes are the highest. It's not just all the DNA that's being harvested by all these archontic genetic engineering type beings, because in truth there's a lot of good beings that are doing genetic engineering work, but they're doing it to balance out and try to raise the frequency and do things fix this whole mess, right? But there's also an aspect that must be understood. There may be a probability exists for a sudden and ongoing release of a lot of souls through sudden death, through a mass culling on the surface, which is already underway, right, because of this depopulation agenda which is going on. And again, there's a lot of ways to look at this, right? Sun Tzu talked about the importance of turning a negative into a positive. Well, I always say there's certain reptilians, subsurface and off-world, that rely on humans, not only on this planet but throughout the cosmos, as a food source. And it seems that there's some reptilian factions that are wiping out the population on the surface here, right? Well, that to me is a built-in conflict of interest. Why doesn't someone pit those two, blocks or factions of reptilians against each other? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. It's not even a case of friend of enemy of my enemy, whatever that phrase is, right? It's like, let them fight it out, right? So like if the Anunnaki come back, aboard Nibiru and its satellite planets and moons, and they want to fight it out with the Anunnaki that's still here, let them fight it out, right? That's just a small part of a much bigger picture. We gotta work at a higher plane, and in the inner and higher planes. That's where we're going to do the most good. But you were going to say?
Yeah, well, I first of all, I want to thank you for addressing this issue. It seems to be one of the aspects of the whole picture that really, shocks people when they find out about it. But you know what? This is a big deal. I did a show one time about all the missing people all over the world, and I didn't know. I had no idea there were so many missing people, even in my home state of North Carolina. Oh, so many people, and a lot of them from parks. A lot of them, like you said, children. Young. It's something. I'm thinking of all the problems people worry about. Why aren't they worrying about this? So, I thank you for being bold enough to address this problem. One of the other things, Angelia talked about all the things that she had to endure. Why do the milabs endure things like? Why don't you just explain what is an astral attack and what is a psychic attack that these reptilians do on the milabs?
Well, the reptilians, because they're masters of frequency and resonance, they can densify particular parts of their anatomy, like, say, their sexual organ, for example. But the rest of their anatomy, their atoms, molecules, etc., have not assembled in our dimension. So the woman or the man who may be getting abused by, say, a reptilian entity, if they're able to move their arms around, they may not be able to feel any physical being above them. They can feel the penetration going on if that's the kind of abuse they're being subjected to. They may feel like a pressure on their chest that's keeping them pinned down. But if they manage to free their arm or their hand up and they try to block this penetration, they may not feel anything with their physical hand, but the penetration sensations persist anyway. So that there's a built-in paradox there, where these beings are masters of frequency and resonance, and they're able to not just access our plane in physical or in an interdimensional sense, but they can densify certain parts of their anatomy. For example, they can be invisible, but then they can suddenly claw you with their claws too, and then your claws, typically 3 very long parallel claw marks, it is very apparent. One looks down and sees it on their chest or their buttocks or their back, wherever it is. That's real enough, right? So because they have this interdimensional capability, they can, whether in normal waking consciousness of the abductee / milab, or in the sleep state of the abductee or milab, they can plug into the auric field of that person, especially if there's holes in their light body, especially if they got some kind of long-standing emotional trauma issues, buried trauma, so on and so forth, or injuries, physical injuries. A lot of the pharmaceuticals and really bad illicit drugs knock further holes into one's auric field and light body and make it easier for these entities to establish strongholds within us, and also add on pornography, all that stuff, right? And so what they do is they plug into us, essentially, and they, like when we're sleeping, they can enter into us physically with their interdimensional body, enter into us as we're sleeping and take over our astral dreamscape from within, create a stage-managed dream from within where we find ourselves coming to some kind of lucidity within a dream, quote-unquote, but it's not a dream. It's a stage-managed virtual environment created by these beings who've momentarily taken up these people as hosts for all intents and purposes. And then they could fill that dream with any kind of images they want. They know that certain images put us ill at ease. For example, most of us tend to be somewhat of a cleanly race, a hygienic race, so oftentimes they'll put us in an astral dreamscape environment where there are feces on the floor or on the ground, or puddles of urine, huge cockroaches running along the sides of the walls, running along the walls, running in the on the ceilings, large rats running around, anything to put us ill at ease.
Oh, that would freak me out with cockroaches. So, yeah, wow, that would freak somebody out.
Oh, yes, they instill phobias. They instill arachnophobia. If a given abductee or milab keeps having dreams of big, huge spiders, or they keep having dreams of being stuck on, say, like a cliff face, and there's no handholds, and you can't go up and you can't go down. You're just stuck, and eventually you have to just jump off to get the nightmare over with. If one keeps having those dreams in a recurring fashion, pretty soon they're going to wind up being an arachnophobic and or an acrophobia, whatever the term is for someone who's afraid of heights, or sometimes both, where someone will be made to have a fear of heights because they keep having dreams of being stuck on ledges or cliffs, and then they're there precariously hanging on to a smooth part of a cliff, and then big spiders start crawling towards them on the cliff face, right? So they combine these two things, and so people wake up having fears of spiders, fears of heights, so on and so forth, or fears of clowns, because sometimes these negative archontic entities can manifest as sadistic clowns. And also the mind controllers use clowns in a lot of their dreams too, where people will be attacked by clowns that look and appear to be made out of a bunch of balloons, for example, that are all like tied together, and they make this squeaking, squealing sound that freaks the hell out of the milab going through the experience. And then these clown balloons could squeeze through the narrow space between doors and pop up in the room that one is hiding in, and then they can't punch these balloon clowns. But they can expand and wrap themselves around you and bop you in the head. And what it does is it creates that and other forms of similar milab and or project person / targeted individual programming. It induces this animalistic fear, right, and this hopeless sense of frustration and desperation, high anxiety times indeed, right, because it behooves them at times to keep milabs in a highly agitated state, because when they access them and utilize them in these ops, it's easier for them to shunt them into maybe more impulsive, kind of aggressive personalities or alters. And also what the reptilians and military do is not only do they access people's dreams and create these virtual dream environments, astral dreamscape environments, through which a lot of programming, behavior modification, and training takes place, right? But they also they electronically beam the impulse control center, the frontal lobe of sleeping, especially male abductees, or female lesbian abductees that are being groomed to be operatives, assassins, so on and so forth. They they beam the frontal lobe, and they chip away at our impulse control net, which stops us from, consciously or unconsciously acting out in an aberrant, violent, at times even sadistic fashion, right? They beam that over and over and over in conjunction with these stage-managed dreams where the milabs or project people are being attacked by swarms of people, being kicked, being jostled, being grabbed, and everywhere they turn and flee, there's another crowd that's coming after them. That's just one type of a reptilian, very common reptilian, deep black milab form of behavior modification when someone is asleep. And there's variations where they try to turn someone into a serial murderer, turn someone into a pedophile, so on and so forth. So what the reptilians and the controllers try to do is they try to slot an abductee and or a milab into a category. And if they can't program them to be one way, they program them to be something else. And oftentimes the template of being impulsive, of being aggressive, of being irrational and prone to emotional outbursts, being mistrustful and paranoid, so on and so forth, right? And I'm talking about, I wouldn't even say in extreme cases, but a lot of my labs wind up in that kind of mindset and that state of mind and state of being. There are many my labs out there who are holding it together very well. They are, as much as possible, maintaining an inner harmony and internal equilibrium despite all the abuse and crap they're subjected to. So it's a psychic, it's a telepathic, it's a physical manipulation. The reptilians can infuse all kinds of imagery into people of a sexual, perverse, and or sadistic nature, depending on why or what purpose they're grooming the person for, right? And also they modify the people inside and out genetically and medically, because they frequently, for certain milabs and abductees, will physically abduct them, but also abduct their astral, light, more ethereal body, and medically work on that also. It's not just our physical bodies that get medical exams and procedures done to engender specific changes, oftentimes of genetic, emotional, nature, but also our what amounts to our astral bodies, where our astral selves are taken into another higher plane and also seemingly medically worked over. And then when we come back, we may have physical marks and bruises and discomfort in those places. Sometimes with physical marks, sometimes without physical marks. So this manipulation is happening at a number of different levels. It's not just the cut and dried physical abductions and medical procedures that David Jacobs and others obsess about it. It happens at multiple different levels. I don't know if I answered your question, though.
Well, you did. And one of the things I'll say about this is some of the milabs that I've spoken to, all these things that you talked about happening to them, they don't know what to do about it. Their solution is to not sleep, and they'll go for days without sleeping. Is that the only way that the reptilians, do they feel like these milabs are more vulnerable while they're sleeping? I mean, why is it for the most part it's when that they are in that state that they come and try to do something?
I would say for some elements of the abductee milab community, in the past, these negative beings of various stripes, they held the tactical and strategic high ground vis-a-vis abductees and milabs because of their interdimensional, these negative entities' interdimensional capabilities, their ability to latch on to people's auric fields and insert their own thoughts into people's minds in the guise of people's own thoughts, which they're not. It may sound like their own thoughts, but they're most decidedly not their own thoughts. You see, what these beings do, too, is they like to instill obsessive-compulsive disorder thought loops. The more negative thought loops, the better, because, as we know, emotions, energy, and motion, if they instill these negative, emotionally laden thought loops of despair, hopelessness, isolation, fear, paranoia, etc., upon us, it lowers us even more, our vibration even more. And so what they do is they just gradually, it's a full spectrum kind of manipulation upon these people, where they're even influencing and manipulating their thoughts. Now, I kind of went off on a tangent. Could you restate your question a moment ago?
Just about. I've had some of the milabs be so. I mean, they realize, there are some milabs who realize that they're being abducted and psychically attacked and astral attacks. They realize it, and what they do is they go for days on end without sleeping.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Well, what I was going to say was, in the past, these entities may have had a strategic tactical advantage because their ability to, like, enter people in their sleep, whatnot, but I think that's changing. And I think for some, the playing field is evening out a bit. But generally, humans and human hybrids of all stripes are oftentimes worked over in their sleep because they're vulnerable. Because they're vulnerable in their sleep. And because for a fully realized spiritual being who is in spiritual, metaphysical, full conscious contact with all their different selves and all their multidimensional aspects, it's very difficult to mess with them in any state, whether they're asleep or whatever passes for sleep for such beings, or in their waking consciousness. But because we've been so detuned genetically, through this frequency fence grid, through the spiritual prison, et cetera, hammered by vaccines and scalar waves, so on and so forth, even our dreams are not normal, quote unquote, whereas in a normal, non-archontically controlled world, we would go dimension hopping when we sleep, and many people do. They go into much higher planes, they go into crystal temples, crystal cathedrals, and they interact with aspects of themselves and other time vectors and other timelines, et cetera, and interact with higher dimensional beings and so on and so forth. What some people have to endure is almost in a permanent sense being shunted into a lower astral dreamscape, where they're just stuck in these lower astral planes where one can't really learn a lot of things, that it's oftentimes highly charged sexually because the lower astral planes are highly charged sexually anyway, which plugs one right into the lower base sexual chakras, which these negative archontic beings want to keep us in, right? And so what happens is they have all manner of abuse meted out to them physically, metaphysically, indeed spiritually, while people are asleep. No wonder so many people hold off on sleeping as long as they can. And some people, and I was like this for a long time, slept with the lights on. I mean, to this day, I could sleep beneath a blinding spotlight. It don't matter to me. I could sleep on a rock pile, in a rock concert, full volume rock concert, with a spotlight shining down me. It don't matter.
You sound like my sons. They could do that too.
And I had to wean myself off of that. I had to sleep, with night lights. I used to sleep with TVs on, and right. But I had to, because again, by scaring us to the point where we don't want to sleep in total darkness, our already severely detuned, negatively impacted indoctrinary system can't pump out enough melatonin for us to have a restful, meaningful sleep, a sleep at all levels of consciousness and awareness. It's when we re-energize, when we heal, sleep is supposed to be. Instead, we're being hammered and attacked, right? You see how that works? So
yeah,
what I encourage people to do, and it doesn't work for everybody, because some abductees and milabs get hammered 24/7. But even for those milabs and abductees who get hammered 24/7, the whole gamut, electromagnetic beaming, even gang stalking, I mean, you name it. For some of these people, they've endured it, right? For some of them, I would say, let's say in round numbers, out of 20 people, but it's actually more, out of 20 people, I would say 16 has benefited tremendously from working with tensor rings. For example, if a milab or abductee were to sleep with even just 144 megahertz basic tensor ring, or the 177 megahertz so-called lost qubit tensor ring, and other tensor products which pump out even higher megahertz energy. It comes out in a toroidal kind of toroidal shape, right? The tensor energy, and and it can spread out for quite a distance. Now, if one were to sleep with a tensor ring beneath their bed or beneath their pillow, depending on how sensitive they are, sometimes if it's beneath their pillow, too much energy, the person can't sleep. These tensors work with intentions. You can tell the tensor, please throttle it back a notch or two so I can sleep comfortably, yet still provide all-around protection, right? One can actually, because they've been designed and programmed to work with intentions. Everything is based on intentions and focused intentions and being driven by the emotional component within us, our emotional body, which is our dynamo. In concert with a strong solar plexus that hasn't been subjected to all these blockages and snake energies and so on and so forth, because that's where our metaphysical intelligence center and our focused will is, our solar plexus. That's why negative entities routinely hammer the solar plexus area. All that together, when we work with intentions along with these tensor products, they can really make a difference. So what I recommend, say if someone is going through these obsessive compulsive OCD negative thought loops of despair and even suicide, right? Obtain one of those smaller tensor coils that are small enough to be worn as pendants, or one of those smaller tensor spheres. They're called personal harmonizers on some websites. That's exactly what they are. Wear them as a, during the day. The tensor coil pendants can be worn at night when one is sleeping. After a while, the coil starts to be bent a little bit. Doesn't matter. It still pumps out the energy, right? So what we do is we make it more difficult for the entities to mess with us when we're most vulnerable, when they have a strategic technical high ground, when we're asleep. Because when we're asleep, we're basically up for grabs. And another thing also, it doesn't hurt to ask. It doesn't hurt to ask. We have nature spirits and nature elementals who are right in our own houses, wherever our own houses reside or are constructed. Beneath that is earth, and that earth has associated nature spirits, elementals, selves. Talk to them. Ask them to heal the earth beneath your feet. Heal the nature around, in and around your home, and also to keep out any malign negative influences. I do this. Like when I'm out and about, it's really warm. In a spirit of gratitude and appreciation, I ask the nature spirits to bless me and the beings around with a nice cooling breeze, and sometimes they do, and I'm thankful for that, because that's how the divine matrix responds when we, as Greg Braden talks about, when we, with focused intent from a heart-centered place and with using the dynamo of our emotional body with a high frequency emotions and expectation of a success and a visualization of a positive outcome. That's how the universe responds to us. And the lag time between the intention going out and the physical manifestation is getting less and less, if a lot of your people will notice. So anyway, getting back to your question, use tensor rings. I have a Rife machine. I have it play in the background, the 356 heart center hertz vibe. I have it play the 40 hertz grounding vibe, right? Which 40 hertz used to be the resonant frequency of the iron core crystal within the center of the earth. Now, because of the Schumann resonance increasing, I don't know if that 40 hertz frequency is still valid anymore, but I seem to derive benefit from it. Also, one could, with their computer speakers, they can run frequencies and tunes and tribal music, whatever the case may be, from YouTube. Just have it play in the background, right? It's a frequency war. It's a frequency war. So one can wear tensor rings, tensor pendants, have tensor spheres and tensors laying around one's house, work desks, etc., etc. And so I would encourage people to do that. And there's certain crystals I would really encourage people to plug into selenite. Selenite wands and swords are a little more expensive, but you can get really good columns of selenite and kyanite, and that will tend to activate your DNA and help to reassemble your extra DNA strands, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of practical things people can do to raise not only their own frequency, but the frequency around them, and make it more of an inhospitable place for these negative beings.
Well, James, that must be something that someone really wants to know, because I just got a text messages from two people, and one of them said, "Oh, thank you," and put a lot of exclamation points, and the other one said, "I was hoping somebody could tell me something I could do to sleep at night." So I know those two people are certainly grateful to get that information, because those are some of those things I've never heard about. So that's good information.
Well, the testimony that I've gotten, they're from people who have endured hardcore milab and abduction experiences. People that were being unmercifully electromagnetically beamed every night, and some of these people, again, some were able to sleep with a tensor beneath their pillow. I don't prefer it; too much energy for me. But some sleep with it under their bed. It's perfect. And not only, get this, not only does it provide all-around protection for most people, right? Because I feel that the people, unfortunately for them, where tensors don't have any beneficial impact, I think in some cases, those people still have a lot of energetic cords stuck and attached to them. They may have entity attachment to one degree or another. They may have bogus soul contracts from one or more past lives that they have to divest themselves of, so on and so forth. So they just have to gradually, over time, detach themselves of all of that, right? And as time goes on, then they will start to see the beneficial aspects of tensor rings and so on. And tensor rings, many of you have used these in past lives in ancient Egypt, Atlantis, Lemuria, so on and so forth. And they're easy to make. There are videos on YouTube of how to make these things, right? And so it's all about raising our frequency. And if you sleep with them beneath your bed, they should be very beneficial. And just check out, I can send you a link later on of my favorite tensor product website, and you can.
Oh, please do. I'll post that on our Skywatcher radio show for all the people that are listening. But yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I hope I answered your question there.
Oh yeah, you did. I have a few questions here sent in by Derek Tyler.
Sure.
I invite people to send in questions, when they know who the guest is and everything. So I have just 2 or 3 here, and then we'll let you talk a little bit about the space program. The first question by Derek is, are the minds of military leaders taken over by reptilians, or is their entire consciousness replaced with reptilian consciousness? And that's, about the people that who are, taken over by the reptilians. So what happens? Are they totally have their consciousness replaced, or how does that work?
Some of them are full-on reptilian and or Draco hybrids to begin with, and some of them are full-on shapeshifters. Now, I must say, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what shapeshifting is. Some of your listeners in their past ET lives were shapeshifters, and you needed to shapeshift because you had to go on undercover missions and pretend to be some other ET and work against the Draco Orion Empire, but pretending to be a certain type of ET. So shapeshifting is not necessarily a bad thing, and shapeshifting, people can shapeshift everyone within their morphogenetic blueprint resonance field. Once they accrete more and more light into their light field and become more multidimensional, more quantum, they will be able to shapeshift too. So shapeshifting is not of necessity an evil, scary, woo-woo thing. It's just that these reptilian Draco hybrids, they use their abilities for nefarious purposes. So for all intents and purposes, some of the hierarchy, not just in the military, but high finance industry, so on and so forth, they are full-on reptilian shapeshifters, and or, whether they're consciously aware of it or not, and or they are at the very least hosts for reptilian or Draco entities. Now, some people are hosted by a variety of entities. We call them collectives. Well, you know, a gifted psychic person could look at this individual, and one moment they see a mantis being, the next they see a Draco, and then a little while later they see a hairy troll-like being. So it's not just one or a mantis being or a gray. It's not just reptilians that take people up as hosts. There's a sympathetic resonance that people have that make it possible for one or more entities of a variety of polarities, sometimes positive beings, can indwell in somebody, right? So higher dimensional, higher frequency spiritual beings, right? Like feline beings, for example. There are people that have like shapeshifted momentarily into feline beings of one kind or another. I would say that's a good thing, a good ability to have, right? Because the felines have been warring against the Draco Empire from time immemorial. They're the ones that basically genetically seeded so many humans throughout the cosmos. So, to answer the question, some of them were Draco hybrids to begin with. Others have been gradually replaced through mind control, through being coerced into, like, say, initiations, if you will, of these very dark, arcane. Again, it's all with intentions. Does black magic exist? Sure, but there's also the ability to manifest and work with elementals and everything on a conscious, heart-centered, focus intent kind of way for the greater good. That happens too. One can call it magic, one cannot call it magic. But in these deep block programs and a lot of the cloning and hybridization that goes on, they will use technological means to infuse certain attributes, characteristics, genetic attributes into a given individual. And they can also use what some would call black magic means to do the same thing. Sometimes it's a combination of both. Sometimes a milab or a commander or some high-ranking mucky-muck in front of the camera or behind the scenes will be implanted, and the implant itself is a gateway to other doorways, dimensions, whatnot, and there's a technological and a magical means of initiating, of activating said implant that's put in somebody, right? A lot of times they'll put these implants like in the third eye area or something, or another part of their anatomy. But some of the implants are also, they're ethereal, energetic implants. They're not physical implants. Those are the trickier ones, and a healer has to be aware of those. So, yeah, and there are videos out there of not only military personnel, but all kinds of people shapeshifting and into reptilians momentarily. And I give credit to all the people out there who've spent thousands of man-hours and woman-hours perusing all the archived news, reel footage, and all these news presenter videos, so on and so forth, to catch that elusive shift. And then they put out videos, and they have YouTube channels on it. Those people have done great work. Other people that have done great work, while I'm on the subject, are a lot of the Planet X Nibiru videographers, a lot of the people who do the videos about the anomalies in the sky, the faces that show up on the artificial chem cloud formations, the badly cloaked huge craft, whether they're ET or man-made craft, so on and so forth. So credit to all those people.
Oh, yeah. And you're right, James. I mean, I'm sure that's why this question was asked about the military leaders, because, you know, anytime you go on the Internet, somewhere you'll read so-and-so is a reptilian.
Oh,
you know, they catch the pictures of, you know, the eyes blinking and showing the little slit in the eye and different things like that. So,
well, for example, let's take the example of General David Petraeus. Some people call him Petraeus, right? When I look at him, I see a full-on reptilian hybrid. The eye sunk deep in the eye sockets, the pronounced cheekbones, angular shape of the face. I'm not trying to cause a witch hunt, but there's a certain facial features one sees on people like like David Petraeus, but he's just an example. Look at all the garden variety serial murderers. Study not only their facial structure, the way their eyes are, but also the vibe they give off too. People have to start paying attention to what their own body is saying. But there's a video of David Petraeus, Senate, military intelligence, congressional testimony of some kind. John McCain, of all people, is chairing this meeting, and he's throwing softball questions to General David Petraeus. Suddenly you hear a thump when the camera is on Senator McCain's face, and then there's a commotion. Well, what happened was General Petraeus passed out and did a face plant right on the table in front of him, right? And and all of his sycophants and toadies huddle around him, and they were huddling around him for a reason, because he was morphing, he was shape-shifting. There are people, go on YouTube, listeners, look for this before it's yanked. There's one guy that did about a 14-minute presentation on this, and he broke it down and he zoomed in. After a while, McCain says, okay, we'll adjourn this, till later, right? And then Petraeus gets up, and he quickly walks away from the table, surrounded by his gophers, and as he gets up, with the freeze frame, you can clearly see his face is morphed. It's gotten more bony. This bony, pronounced kind of protrusion is jutted out from the side of his face, and he's turned kind of this claret, kind of slightly green color. And that happens too. So he's just an example. He was having problems holding his shape. He was probably fighting real hard. Who knows what it could have happened. Maybe there was a woman in the congressional hearing place that was on her monthly moon. Who knows, right? Because they position those places in high vortex areas anyway. So we must be careful too. People say, first of all, most of us who came into this world in the quote-unquote normal way, okay, and normal to me includes being being messed with in the womb by ETs of one sort or another, and the negative ETs even knowing who we are shortly after birth, even before we know who we are ourselves, right? They track us oftentimes lifetime after lifetime. They pick up our resonant frequency. Oh, it's this pain in the ass again, right? So they follow us basically, and most of us are going to have some degree of reptilian DNA. That's just the way it is. Most of us have to one degree or another reptilian DNA. Some more than others, right? So there's no shame in that, and there's a lot of RH negs out there that are proud to be RH negs, and they should be proud of being RH negs, especially the heart-centered ones that are spiritual warriors, and they know that they're doing their part to dismantle the Draco Empire and fix this entire plan. I know they're out there, right? Because this bad rap has developed where, RH neg, woo-woo, reptiles. No, that's precisely the wrong way to look at it, right? So another thing also is they constantly hammer us with the feeling, the vibe, and the image of reptilian Draco hybrid news presenters. That's why so many of the video captures, quote-unquote, are of news presenters, anchormen, anchorwomen, news presenters in the field who shapeshift, because the underlying subliminal message is we, i.e. the reptilian overlords, are telling you our version of reality. We're making you believe what we tell you. And see, these presenters, many of them are reptilian hybrids, right? Because many of them were captured shapeshifting right on TV, right? But see, there's a subliminal underlying message is we're the ones that tell you what to believe. That's what that message is all about, right? Yeah. Because everywhere they look, there's another reptilian TV news presenter shapeshifting or stumbling over their words or morphing, or in General David Petraeus' case, slamming face first into a table and then, walking away as he's morphing. But that's just one example. See what
I'm going to look at that. That is so interesting. I can't wait to look at that after a while. Thanks for bringing that up.
Well, it must be understood that this concept of morphing and shapeshifting has been with us since time immemorial. Werewolves, werelions, weretigers, all that stuff is real. this morphing, shape-shifting capability is utilized by deep black military controllers in these MyLab ops. I know cases of people who have seen like people shape-shifting into what we would call lichens, werewolf-type beings. Some of these wear military uniforms. Some of them, are wearing, other kind of outfits. Because in actual fact, these wolf-type beings, they're actually quite common throughout the cosmos. There's some of them that are from the Sirius system and other places throughout the cosmos. And so beings that we would call werewolves that can or cannot shapeshift, because it's probably both kinds, they've been here all along, and somewhere along the line, some of them may have been captured by deep black military intelligence, aerospace community, genetically tinkered with. Then they go and create hybrid variants thereof. Pamela Hamilton, a well-known hybrid MyLab from Southern California, she was abducted by a werewolf wearing an Air Force uniform who talked to her in perfect English and threatened her. I know other MyLab.
Oh, scary.
Yeah, I know other MyLab women who've been taken by wolfen-type humanoids into underground bases, right? And people have reported in some of these ops that, and sometimes there's a fudge factor. They're not sure if this is like a military MyLab op in conjunction or not in conjunction with allied ET races, right? Usually of a negative variety, because a lot of MyLabs, they also are operatives, whether they're aware of it or not, in multiple states of being and in multiple planes and dimensions, not just this one. Because both on the negative side, the deep black military and negative ET controllers, as well as the more positive spiritually evolved beings, they know how to engender these changes within MyLabs. They know how to bring out into conscious awareness, usually in a higher consciousness awareness, all these metaphysical abilities within this, that, or the other abductee or MyLab. And they will, positive beings will use these people in operations, right, in ops, oftentimes to kind of negate the malign influence throughout the multiverse of the negative beings. And a lot of these MyLabs and abductees will even find themselves in council meetings where there's a number of different ET races, usually of higher dimensions, present, right? And they're there as an equal. They're not there as some kind of toady or a gopher. In their higher state of conscious awareness, they're the equals of all these higher spiritual beings. That's what they want us to forget. They want us to think we're just slaves, right? Like we're just gladiators for them, but we're not. Within each MyLab out there is a Spartacus waiting to come out, right? So
I like that. I like that, James.
So some of these shape-shifting skills within latent within people, and some people know consciously how to shapeshift. Good and bad people consciously know how to do this. For some people, for limited periods of time. So the shape-shifting ability, not just to turn into werewolves, not just to turn into reptilians, or whatever the case may be, but other beings, they are also, that capability is also utilized in these ops. And again, it goes back to the age-old tales of werewolves, were-tigers, were-lions, etc., etc., etc. This is Atlantis all over again. This is why stories from Greek mythology seem normal to me. All the shape-shifting. Look, your listeners ought to type up Nanabush, Nanabush. Nanabush was the creator warrior god of the Ojibwa Native Americans in like the Great Lakes area, right? Read the creation stories about him. He's battling the serpent people. He's battling like women who were really reptilian shapeshifters, so on and so forth. That's their creation story. And that's just one of many similar stories around the world, right? Now, there's this concerted effort to keep all this at the 5 sense conspiracy level. Oh, it's just psychopaths and sociopaths. No. Because psychology follows neurology, which follows genetics, and certain loathsome, onerous attributes and characteristics can be imbued within certain bloodlines that have been targeted for exploitation. Just as a dog breeder can engender certain physical and behavioral attributes within the breeding lines that he or she is creating, if they want to make them more vicious, smarter, whatever the case may be.
Exactly.
These beings of varying stripes and polarities, they do the same thing. And now the so-called humans, although I would argue there is no such thing as a purely human deep black operation, because there's so much infiltration, right? So many of the people controlling these deep black ops at the highest levels are hybrids and shapeshifters themselves, right? And the consciousness of some of these people can't even be called purely human. They operate in a multidimensional sense. We have to start thinking in an expanded arena. We have to think beyond just what's going on in our little corner of the multiverse. It's a much bigger picture than that. Did Derek have any more questions?
Yeah, I've got two more short little questions, and then we'll get on to the space program. I think you might have already answered half of this. Do you consider inserting hybrids into local population without the public knowledge an act of war and its colonization that it has had in progress? And I know for myself, there's a lot of, what a starseed is.
Yes.
They believe in the Space Brothers and
Yes.
gentleness, will all love each other, and, it'll be Alice in Wonderland. This is hard information for them to swallow. I mean,
yes.
How do you feel about that? Do you think it's an act of war?
I'll address that question really quickly about the starseeds. There's a lot of infiltration into the starseed forums online. These people unwittingly go on there and they talk about their experiences. They talk about their metaphysical abilities. They talk about their indigo children. Please don't do that. Your special children should be a military secret, and sooner or later, one side or the other will find out about them anyway. But these people go onto these starseed forums and share all this information. Pretty soon they're pulled in. If they haven't been in a black op before, now they are now. Suddenly, not only are they pulled into a black op, but there are people online who maybe are archontic and working kind of in a solo fashion, but they're essentially part of the archontic architecture. And there are people that are actual recruiters for these deep black projects. And they look for people that come on these starseed forums and talk about their experiences and whatnot and their memories, right? So people need to be aware of this. As far as the concept of colonization and invasion, I liken the Earth to like a big terrarium. I mean, we've even got this artificial moon, which we only ever see one side of, completely unnatural, right? And this is a big terrarium we're in, energetically and physically. It's a soft cage. Like, for example, if one were to have like a hamster or even a pet lizard, people like us would tend to shower love and affection, provide clean water, clean food, health care. Now, look at all those different aspects which I just described, which we give out of, a place of loving kindness to our, I hate to call them pets, right? And look at the inverse of that. We on this terrarium have to endure. The food is toxic, the air is toxic. Photonic energy from the sun actually activates our higher centers, not just our crown and third eye chakra, but the higher transpersonal chakras above our heads, the star soul chakra, the stellar gateway chakra, etc., etc. We need that sunlight, but we have this chemtrail haze above us. Serves a multiple role. It not only poisons us and whatever nanobots and other elements are within it, and aids in the depopulation agenda, but it also obscures the sky so we can't see signs and wonders in heaven and exoplanets and huge crap, etc., right? Multi-purpose. But all that serves to keep us in a very dim, globally dimmed surface world, right? And,
right.
And so, and all the other things combined, the food we eat is toxic, lowers our vibration, makes us ill. The scientists tell us to lather up every exposed bit of flesh to protect us from the scary sun, and then the skincare lotion they provide us with are petroleum-based. Everything is topsy-turvy, inside out on this world. it's like, just think of, like, we always hear these stories, sad and horrible stories about abused animals and, you know, all the abuse, the neglectful and abusive owners subject them to. But as Jay Essex, he's a well-known psychic and a mystic seer in his own right. You can find some of his stuff online. He calls this plane, this dimension, a plane or a dimension of abuse. I forget exact terms, and he's right, because even at you know, the four-legged animal you know, scheme of things, you know, one type of animal is preying on another, and then animals that are preyed on eat grass, which are, you know, and plants, which are consciousness too. So it's a plane of abuse all the way around, right? So
yeah.
So what these beings have done is, after the most recent round of celestially driven cataclysms, after survivors came out of the caves, and after you know, the Earth settled in its new axis, there was less people for them to have to deal with. So they went to work on a lot of the surviving bloodlines in earnest, in a genetic, spiritual, mind control fashion, and foisted all these patriarchal religions to, you know, marginalize and, if not try to eradicate, the divine mother, goddess, the divine feminine principle, so on and so forth. So what we're seeing now, it's the end game. It's the desired outcome of what these reptilian Draco and other archontic beings want. I would tell people, though, that to borrow a term from the sports world, we've still got another half to play. Okay, the game isn't over yet. You know, in a plane of dualities, which are rapidly becoming even more extreme by the moment. There are endless probabilities and possibilities of outcomes further down this time stream. Some may happen, some may not happen. Nothing is written in stone. So, you know, collectively, if we just raise our frequency high enough and, you know, expand our conscious awareness, become more multidimensional, we can, individually, collectively, we can make a difference. But I wouldn't call it an invasion so much as, you know, it's like a rancher moving, you know, driving his herd from one place to another. It's just this kind of thing has happened on other worlds. It's not something that's unique to planet Earth. There's this notion, this spiritually immature notion, that holds that evil is somehow like a homegrown product of planet Earth, as if this organism, a divine organism, Earth, would create something which is harmful to itself. No, this was all imported. It was all brought here from these lower nether, like anti-life dimensions and universes, right? And given form, and because they just created this kind of thing. And it wasn't always like this. There really were these ages of like golden ages of evolved civilizations, but even those advanced civilizations here on the surface, far more advanced than this one, even they had problems. Even they had internal fighting and factionalism and having to deal with external threats, not only from other advanced civilizations on the surface and below the surface, but also extraterrestrially too. So this is just the latest installment of what's going on. It's not even unique or new to this planet. Certainly not unique to this galaxy. What I should add before we go to the next question is that a lot of your milabs and abductees, and people in general that have kind of a shamanistic kind of sensibility, to them, they've had a lot of futuristic dreams of not only celestially driven cataclysms, tsunamis, nuclear wars, massive civil unrest, so on and so forth. But they've also had dreams of seeing like huge craft, like the shadow of a huge craft above the darkened artificial chemtrail cloud cover. And they've seen huge craft come down from these huge this cloud cover in huge holes, and they've had dreams of seeing like craft poorly hidden within artificial cloud formations. They've had dreams of being chased down the street, like Main Street, USA, in broad daylight by these deep black triangular, obviously man-made craft that are not only spraying chemtrails, but also dropping like gelatinous kind of reddish, kind of pinkish kind of liquids, right, all over the place. And who knows what the implications of that is, right? One can only imagine. And we see an analog in that anyway of all the contamination and stuff being deliberately released and sprayed and so on and so forth. What's interesting is a lot of those dreams that people have had, they're playing out in our skies right now because of those aforementioned Skywatchers who not only monitor the chemtrail activity, but they've also noticed because, again, the people with blinders on, the ones shunted too far into the left brain, the Mr. Spock types, even if there's a big gray kind of cloud face looking at them through their viewfinder, they'll find a reason to say why that's just a normal kind of cloud formation, or maybe that's just a normal artificial cloud formation. They'll completely tune out or ignore, or the image of the gray face or whatever it is will go right over their heads. But that's what people are seeing. That's what I'm seeing. That's what many people are seeing. There's holographic projections in our skies. There's very poor efforts at cloaking, but there are also good efforts. But using solarization, using a variety of techniques, one can see what seem to be in some cases like many probably man-made craft hiding in the artificial cloud banks and in the corona of the sun. But also what was clear to me is non-human, very large craft of all different shapes and sizes, right?
Interesting.
Yes, and also what we're seeing is because there's this merging of worlds, and it's this merging of planes and dimensions, but also the time streams are starting to enmesh. My friends that are on frequent time travel ops, I mean, they'll wake up and they'll say, "Oh no, I'm back in my alternate reality bedroom," And sometimes, I mean, you have to laugh at some of this. Right?
Yeah.
Like a buddy of mine, he woke up and he turned and he bumped into the wall because in his regular our current reality, his feet would just hit the floor and he'd get up and he'd start his day. But in that particular alternate reality bedroom, there's a wall there, so he instead of like dropping his feet to the floor, he runs into a wall. Now, when I write my novel, I'm going to say that he landed face first, like in the wall, to try to add some black humor to it. You know what I mean? But but know that those things are real. And he'll walk around his bedroom, look around, and the photos, the portraits, things are slightly different, and he'll know I'm in that other place, right? And so that's being reflected in the skies too, because what we're seeing is like huge images of dolphins, huge images of big dragons, huge images of big reptilians and different beings, but they're like kind of in cloud kind of energetic form, right? And it's right there. People don't have to outline some of these things and say, okay, look at this. Just take a look at it. It's there. Just use our imagination again that we used to have. See, I don't know how much time you have.
It's bizarre you mentioned this because I just took a picture the other day of a shark in the sky. It was a shark, and everybody was going like, wow. Well, that is so cool.
Some of that, I would venture is artificial. That somebody just thought they would get a kick out of creating something like that. But I think because of this merging of realities, blending of timelines, and so on and so forth, that some of that is not just bleed through; it's full on manifestation now, right? So kudos to people. There's a gal out there named Joanne Creamer. She's doing a fantastic job. She's a pioneer in this. There's many others, and it turned out that there's a whole bunch of people out there like Joanne that's doing this kind of work. It's not just her. I mean, she found out that, wow, there's a whole bunch of the other people that notice this stuff. Of course, because it's there, right? Because the fundamental constants are changing. The fundamental constants are changing. Not only is the Schumann resonance increased, and in practice, what people have figured out, which has the ring of truth to me, is that a lot of us, feel that this illusionary time frequency is accelerating. And one very practical byproduct of the Schumann resonance increasing of this planet is that our 24-hour days are more like 16-hour days. Some would argue, like that time traveler friend of mine who, had that issue with, the alternate bedroom recently. He thinks that it's probably closer to 12 to 14 hours our days now. That's how quickly things have accelerated. That could be a good thing. That could be a bad thing. It depends on how we ride this frequency wave. So that's going on too. The fundamental concepts are changing. Well, what's interesting also is, and a lot of these stories from scientific journals and also websites that post scientific journals and also metaphysically oriented websites, but a lot of these stories were scrubbed off the internet, talks about how physicists were freaking out the world over because even normally stable particles, elements rather, such as carbon-14, are exhibiting rapid decay, right? Now, what does that say for people like us who are essentially carbon-based life forms, right?
Right.
If carbon-14 is manifesting and is scientifically proven to be exhibiting accelerated decay, well, what does that mean for what mainstream scientists and physicists call the fabric reality, right? So, again, we have to turn this into a positive. We have to make the best of that. So there'll come a point in time, and it cycles back to that whole shape-shifting thing. It's harder and harder for them to hold their shape, some of them, right? Some of the more negative inclined shapeshifters that are reptilians and Dracos and whatnot. So as time goes on, we're going to be seeing more and more of this because of the perma-chemtrail haze. We're not seeing the extra sun and the extra planets like we normally would have, right? But it's there. And see, not only is our planet going through its accession evolutionary process, which some negative beings are desperately trying to forestall and stop entirely, but that means that, like a psychical intruder like the Planet X system, Nibiru system, call it what one will, is also going through its own ascension or descension, if that's a word, process. And here it comes sailing into our solar system. That's going to add another X factor into the whole equation, the whole dynamic. You see how that works?
Yes.
And there are some who say, now, first of all, some of these planets are only visible in the infrared. Indeed, it was the IRAS, the infrared space satellite that NASA sent out, which first detected this planet about 4 or 5 times the size of Earth, way out, but heading into our solar system. They knew it was there because of the perturbation it was causing on some of the planets in our solar system. They knew it was coming up from the southern skies, but it was not visible in the visible spectrum because the optical imagery wasn't picking anything up. So they decided to send an infrared satellite sensor out, and sure enough, they detected it. And that was in like the early 1980s. The Navy astronomer who was attached to the Naval Observatory, Robert S. Harrington, who knew all about that, he, like many other astronomers, had an untimely death. So, but what's interesting is not only are some of these extra planets in the infrared, people that have the mystical seer kind of remote viewing capability, the impressions they're getting, what they're perceiving is that there's an interdimensional aspect to some of those planets too. This extra solar system that's moved in, and it stands to reason because the fundamental concepts are changing. Shapeshifters are having a harder time holding, their position. Sometimes what people have noticed also is that some of the astronomical bodies in our solar system, like the moon, suddenly they're getting really wonky looking. They're looking egg-shaped. It's like one moment it's normal, quote unquote, and the next it's turned upside down, right? So, and then also to add further stuff into the mix, not only are some ET civilizations leaving the solar system, but we can see through the SOHO imagery SOHO satellite imagery of the sun, that there are humongous planet-sized and larger craft showing up, heaps of them. And there is a video also of not planet-sized craft, but still quite large, of what I know to be a Stargate opening up, although it's dark, you can't see it. I think the imagery was taken from the International Space Station, but what it shows is a whole fleet of craft entering our solar system through a big Stargate. And these Stargates are naturally occurring, many of them all over our planet, but also many of them artificially created. And so not only are very large craft, planet-sized and larger of all shapes, showing up, entering the solar system via our sun, which itself is part of a big Stargate network, but also smaller Stargates are opening up and allowing fleets of smaller yet still large craft to enter into our solar system. So it's all coming down here, because here is where all the souls are, here is where all the DNA is, and what's happening here will have a profound effect on the multiverse, not just our plane, but I really believe that it's going to affect other planes and other dimensions too.
That is totally amazing, and I never really had thought about it, in that way. But I believe you're right, and I have read many of the things you just talked about. I, had read in the last few months, so it's certainly something for us to pay attention to. We only have about 5 minutes left, so I'll let you just talk just a little bit about the space program, and I can see that I'll have to have you back in the future to talk about this, because we have so much fun talking about the milabs and all the things that are going on with the reptilians. I just really love all the information that you have about them, because you can't just talk about this, with anybody. But could you just give us just a few minutes about anything new that's going on to the space program that we should be
I may have talked about it in the previous time we were together. I think I've talked about it since on other shows. But just as some ET races and advanced civilizations that have been here all along, either beneath the ocean floor or deep within the earth, not only has there been some migrations, let's say, either to safer places, beneath the surface, or entirely off-planet, entirely out of the solar system, but we see that reflected in the deep black secret space programs, where in the recent past, a number of my labs have told me that, and they're not sure sometimes whether it's their own higher self, they did this on kind of a standalone, solo kind of higher sense self, where they somehow infiltrated these, my lab operations, either underground or off-world, or sometimes even another dimension, another plane, or they were there as a my lab under control. And what they're describing is big-time logistical operations to move large amounts of cargo, large amounts of equipment, either in some cases, what's been described to me is it's being brought underground, a lot of this stuff, like they're settling down for the long haul down there. Again, whether beneath the surface of this planet or another planet, I don't know. And some of the preparations may be for one or more factions of this secret space program to, like some of the ET races, to temporarily leave, at least temporarily, leave the solar system, right? Because many of them have established bases, not only throughout our plane of existence, our cosmos, but also for some time now, some of the more advanced military groups have been able to carve out niches for themselves in other dimensions, what amounts to other planes and other dimensions, right? So they're already operating at a number of different planes, as are, they always strive to emulate or duplicate the capabilities of the most advanced ET races out there. The deep black military aerospace does, and they are quite advanced. Anything that we can see on Star Trek or Stargate SG-1, that's old hat for some time now. So it seems to me that there are these big logistical operations to move cargo around for whatever reason. Right now, having said that, the time I've got left, I'd like to give a shout out to one of the true pioneers. I don't even know if she's still on this side of the veil anymore, but it's a gal, a friend of mine named Barbara Krause Brown, who was known as YO on the internet. Now, all the trolls and detractors and haters and villains have tried to make YO out to be a raving lunatic, so on and so forth. Or YO had endured a lot of harassment. Her partner, I think it was her husband named Freddie, was killed, and her family was attacked, and she endured a lot of hardship over the years because she was a pioneer, now get this, of utilizing solarization techniques, special filters, Photoshop techniques, what have you, on images of not only people but surroundings. So not only can she detect if somebody was taken up as a host or had an entity attachment, but she could see, using the different filters, entities of all forms and types, snake entities, ETs, reptilians, all kinds of equipment, ET equipment, so on and so forth, in what would just appear to be like blank space, like say a picture of like someone's living room or attic, or a picture of someone's front lawn. There's a lot more going on there. Any physicist worth their salt will say that we live in a multiverse and we're surrounded by all kinds of intelligent life. We just cannot tune into that. Well, by skillful, adroit use of these solarization techniques, YO was able to see all kinds of stuff in and around people, in and around places. And the powers that be did not like that, not at all, because she was easily able to show that some people were actually taken up as hosts by reptilians and various different beings. So that's one thing I'd like to say very quickly, because she was kind of the pioneer who went before all the people that were taking all the video and analyzing all the faces and all the hidden craft and all the portal activity going on in the skies above us. So kudos to YO for being the pioneer. One last thing, and I really I need to talk more about this sometime, is I encourage everyone to reclaim the power of imagination. Those of you that have past life memories, just visualize yourself. The power of imagination. We're told that it's a bad thing. It's bad to have a strong, powerful imagination. No, because a focused intent from a heart-centered place and the ability to hold and maintain visual imagery and also third-eye imagery, that's one step removed from full-on manifestation. So if some of you know you had past lives, say in ET, in the Lyran constellation, Palladian, or you were involved in the endless Orion Wars way back when, visualize yourself doing day-to-day mundane kind of things. Visualize, if you know you had a past life as a high priestess, just visualize yourself doing like mundane things in a temple. The power of imagination. What you're doing is you're plugging into what would be, from our perspective, a past time vector, but you're shifting your conscious awareness. You're conditioning it to move backward and forward in time, right? And remember, all time is the eternal now, so it's not really your past lives you're plugging into, because in a different time vector, space-time continuum, that's going on right now. And not only can we look back in our own past, in this current timeline, and visualize and imagine different outcomes for things that didn't work out too well for us in the past, thereby moving a lot of blocked, crystalline thought forms laden with negative emotions and misgivings, and move those out and transmute them into higher frequencies, which aids in the ascension process and the reassembling of DNA. But, if we know that we have parallel or future lives or past lives, we can plug into them. We can use the power of imagination, visualize, see ourselves doing things, because in reality, some of the things you're visualizing yourself doing, you really did. You really did fly in scout craft and visit, planets, not only this planet, but other planets. Some of you were literally those sky gods that are written about in the Mahabharata and other epics, where you're battling each other in the skies of not just this planet, but other planets. Some of you have memories of being devic entities, of being creator entities, creating life and creating stars and stuff like that. All that is real. Plug into that from a heart-centered, egoless place. Continue to visualize that, and thereby become more multidimensional, more quantum in the process. We are the sum of all our parts. So anyway, I just wanted to leave everyone with that thought. And thank you for having me on here again. I'm sorry if I ramble. Sometimes I just kind of go all over the place. You know what I mean?
No, that's how I am too. But that's how women can be sometimes. But could you give everybody your website and how they can get in touch with you? Because I know a lot of people will be wanting to find out when your documentary comes out.
The documentary is done by Chris Turner. I'm just a participant in it. He was gracious enough to invite me. theuniversalseduction.com/Bartley, and you'll find a way to contact me on there. And looking forward to hearing from all the people out there. So thanks again for having me on here. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome, James. And I did post your website on Skywatcher Radio Show on Facebook, so people can find it there, as well as a link to this podcast when we get it put up. And I would just like to say, James, your work and others like you are so appreciated and much needed for the betterment of humanity. As usual, it has been a pleasure to talk with you, and I look forward to finding out what's going on with you in the future, and I'm sure we'll have you back again.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Skywatcher Radio.